Howdy, howdy, lads, MBs, and lasses. If you still live in the Harris Branch neighborhood in Austin, Texas, my name's Anthony, still your neighbor. No longer on the board, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Really quick, as always, I do want to explain to everyone coming here that this is my personal analysis of what's going on with the HOA, whether it is me on the board or me off the board. This is just for those new folks filtering in. If you're new here, be sure to hit subscribe. I do plan on being at all these meetings in person since it seems that they're not making it very convenient for us to be there online. And I will provide those updates to you on this channel. So if you hit subscribe, you should get a notification when I post these videos. Hit like if you enjoy these, or if you have any thoughts, praises, or concerns, put them in the comments below, and I will do my best to get those addressed. For those old heads who've been in the community now for at least a couple years, we are back to the old days of when I was not on the board, but still covering it.
It will be a prosperous and peaceful time for us old heads.
Hopefully, with the new regime that Vanessa has ushered in, we will see some reasonability. However, we're not off to a great start. This is the HOA update for the October meeting. These usually are supposed to happen, or at least they always used to happen, on the third Thursday of every month. However, guidance of Vanessa Silas as president, they have kind of been all over the place for the last couple years. This one was no exception. Tuesday was the time of this event. And because it turns out that Goodwin did not have permission to be using the community center, and somebody, a homeowner, called it in, they had to have these meetings at the Texas Empowerment Academy. It's up there off of Palmer near Harris Branch Parkway. It's that new school that's over there. If you're going to it, which I'm going to probably start recommending, since at this point, based off of what they were pulling during this meeting, as far as muting the mic so those online couldn't hear, or members on the board joking or laughing near the mic so the homeowners couldn't hear the responses of other members of the board, or Ian with Goodwin.
Would you please be quiet?
So it seems like they're really cracking down on this. One last note on that, which is very eye-opening, is that Vanessa and Fred, along with Michelle's vote, have stated that they will no longer recognize board members who join these meetings remotely in regards to counting their vote. They are forcing the new candidate who will be coming in to replace Jose, as well as Vinny, into these meetings instead of allowing remote attendance. Now we'll see here the agenda. This is posted on Town Square. All the links are, as always, in the description below. Make sure you set up your Town Square account, and if you want notifications on when they post things there, make sure to sign up for those notifications to go to your emails. There's also a couple other groups that are run by homeowners that you can follow down there, including a couple Facebook groups and Instagram accounts. One, we had the call to order. Two, the roll call verify quorum. We had Vanessa there. Vinny was there, although a little bit late. 3, Jose was not there. 4, Fred was there. And 5, Michelle was there. Fred and Michelle are the two newest candidates. I will go over the election here in a second, but let's get through this meeting and then we can go over those results. So as soon as the number 2, the call was done for quorum, which they had, the board immediately went into an executive session. I had overheard Fred complaining that I was recording this meeting. It seems like he's unaware that Texas is a one-party consent state, which is not looking great for somebody who considers himself an attorney. They were there in that room, separate from the rest of us, sitting out there waiting for about 18 minutes. Whatever they were discussing, of course, we don't know, but you guys can probably fill in the blank. While that was going on, there was an armed security guard that was sitting at the HOA meeting inside the school. I have a video here. A quick question. Are you the hired security for the HOA meeting?
Yes.
Okay, so you get paid every time that they do these meetings?
Not really, but yeah,
But they're
sometimes I
paying,
do,
yeah.
sometimes I don't.
Okay, yeah. I was just curious. It's new to see somebody here with a firearm at a HOA meeting. It turns out that we are using homeowner funds for an armed security guard for HOA meetings. One other thing that was very fascinating, they had a clipboard that they were asking everyone to sign in and provide personal information. If you go to these meetings, understand you do not have to fill that out. You may remain anonymous. If you want to fill it out, feel free, but there is nothing that says you have to fill that out in order for you to participate. We went to 3, the Board of Directors Officers Organization. I already spilled the beans on this. I'm sure some of you saw his post on Nextdoor. He has quit. He is not excited about being on the board any longer with Vanessa as the leader of it or even still on it. So that was something that he had discussed about leaving after the elections to see how things went. My time with Jose was great. They definitely had some issues as far as understanding the dynamics that were going on with the 2 Vs. I know that was probably the most intense HOA experience anyone could probably have. I can tell you from experience that was definitely one for me. I even have emails from the previous president, Mike McLaughlin, stating that it was too much and that's why he didn't run again. For approval of August meeting minutes, that was done. 3 yes, 1 abstained. We had number 5, approval of 2023 annual meeting minutes. That was completed. 3 approved, 1 abstained. 6, we had the homeowner forum. They had 3 minutes on the agenda. However, in the meeting, they only gave us 2.
Now, the homeowner forum is open. We have a timekeeper. It's 2 minutes.
So again, you're starting to see really how this board's going to run as far as accessibility and transparency. I hate to say it, but anybody who voted for these folks thinking that they were going to get more transparency, I've got a bridge to sell you. During that homeowner forum, I, of course, was the only one who spoke up. I had a couple questions. One of the things that Fred was adamant about was destroying one of the no-mow zones. He doesn't seem to appreciate trees. He also doesn't have a clear understanding how erosion works, and definitely demonstrated he's uneducated when it comes to the process of flood mitigation in watersheds.
Hey, Harris Branch neighbors, this is Fred Houston. And also, I just want to let you know, if I win, we're going to get this mess back here cleaned up.
You're going to give back to the earth what you take from it, and you don't burn the forest down.
So really quick, I'm going to run through that. Essentially, the previous boards, one under Mike McLaughlin, the other under Vanessa, we entered into 26-year deeds on those properties. So what that meant is we will not mow or destroy those for 26 years, allowing the thousands of saplings that tree folks in the city of Austin and Austin Watershed Protection paid contractors to come out and install. I'll put this up on the screen for you so you can read over it. But if Fred goes through with that, it will be over $3,000 per acre in fines to the HOA. I wanted to make sure that he was aware of it and that Michelle was aware of it. In the video, you can hear Michelle admitted that she was aware of it. Fred gave a very fascinating answer. He explained that the board doesn't need to answer homeowners' questions. I did want to ask each of the new board members individually, as far as there is conversation here about a forced mow in the protected no-mow zones. And I wanted to see if each one of you were aware that the HOA previously under Mike McLaughlin as president, the HOA under Vanessa Silas as president, entered into 26-year deed restrictions on those no-mow areas. So they are protected. If they are destroyed, the HOA would incur thousands of dollars in fines that would be levied by the city of Austin, tree folks, and the Austin watershed. So I wanted to ask each one of you if you were aware of that. I understand that the HOA can decide to spend our money to destroy those spaces and pay those fines, but I wasn't sure because I didn't get a response from Ian when I messaged him to make sure that you guys were aware. Are you aware? Were you aware?
I have heard about it.
Okay.
Yes.
Fred, are you aware of that?
The board members don't have to respond during a homeowners forum. The purpose here is to give you an opportunity to speak for 2 minutes. So I'm going to let you speak for your 2 minutes, and we're going to move on.
Perfect. Then now you're aware. Think about that. Mr. Transparency,
I apologize for being so transparent.
you don't have to answer any questions. In that regards, at least now we have a video of him being aware. I shared the information with him. Something to keep in mind. Y'all keep an eye on these 2 areas. I'm going to show you the one is some information about what they did. And the other one that's about to be planted, these are all done by tree folks, but you can see the sponsors and the hard work that goes into this, as well as the benefits that come along with this. You'll see trees and shade that will help stabilize all these banks in these areas, especially around these watersheds, because if you go into these areas, especially the one along Sterling Bridge, and I think I have a couple pictures. I'll put them up here so that way you can take a look at it as well. And you can see the carve-outs because the turf grass under those trees isn't enough to keep erosion from happening. Anyone's homes that are along those banks, they're going to see a big issue if they don't stabilize those banks. The same issue was happening over in the St. Marion Greenbelt. That's when the watershed gave us control of that dammed area, and they worked with us and tree folks to come up with a plan to protect that dam with canopy that puts deep root systems in, prevents erosion, and holds that together, as well as provides scenery and all the other good things that come along with that. So that was the first question I was able to get off in my 2 minutes. The second question came up onto the protection of the green wall, a $350,000 project, one of the biggest investments in this community that the entire board voted for approval. It's so annoying that we're still talking about this, but now we're in a stage where I wanted to see, would they protect that space, making sure it's watered, making sure it's trimmed, the maintenance of it, or would they let that go the way of the Harris Branch corridor that the master board has let go? Keep in mind, this October 13th, we hit 100 degrees. That's a new record. Latest in the year since the record keeping began in 1898. And something else to really put your mind on this, we didn't just beat a record, we shattered it by 11 days. The previous record was October 2nd, which was in 1938. So we are in for some hard-hitting headwinds. And when you have a bunch of plants that were expecting water in the normal rainy season of October, it is up to those in power who have the ability to address that, to make sure that they listen to the professionals when it comes to the contractors and landscapers, and even to the voices of the residents who say, hey, we don't want this to go to waste. Make sure you take care of it. The other aspect of that is the one of the largest investments in the community was the green wall. We spent upwards of $343,000 on that. I was curious if the new board is committed to protecting that investment, or is that going to be let to go to waste when it comes to watering or management of that space. And since now that's out there, let it marinate. And of course, at that point, Vanessa, Fred, Michelle obviously didn't answer, which in and of itself is an answer. Then the final question I had for the board within my reduced 2 minutes, I asked them about the replacement of Jose. Now, something many of you may not know, but the tradition in this community has always been, at least as far as Mike McLaughlin's been on the board, including myself, that in the event that member on the HOA steps down during their term, we would reach out to the next runner-up who ran a campaign or even just submitted their application, did the bare minimum, who had the next most votes. This tradition got shattered during Vanessa's presidency. And thanks to Jose. Essentially, we would have handed this out to the next runner-up. Unfortunately, Jose and Vanessa said no, they didn't want to do that, so the board was stuck in a 2-2 vote. The treasurer at that time conceded to work with Jose, and they were together to vote on one of Jose's friends. That was a shift in the way that the community has always done it, and that set a precedent.
Una tradición de la familia que tú rompiste.
That Vanessa was going to take advantage and is already doing. However, they didn't answer that question, so we'll get to the answer to that later. Now, when I said that I was the only homeowner who got up and asked them questions, to be clear, that didn't mean I was the only one who spoke. We had another homeowner from Shadow Glen, a Patrick Patterson. He campaigned during his homeowner time about running for one of the local positions here with the Manor ISD. There was no questions to the board. Apparently, he's good friends with Vanessa, so he was invited to campaign at the meeting. 7, the president's report. That was very short. All we got from Vanessa was there was a document prepared for the association. She didn't go into any information on what it was in the doc, but claimed we would get it. Again, remember, transparency, guys. This is the transparent board that Vanessa promised. 8, the treasurer's report. This got deferred to Goodwin. Ian went over this, so I'm going to run through a couple of the points. Again, this is all on Town Square. You can always see the budget and that information. They put it up in PDF, so if you click on the announcement or the message or news, there will be a hyperlink in the bottom. If you see that hyperlink, click it. Normally, that's where you'll find the PDF with information on it. So if you're just clicking on the link inside of Town Square, as far as the message or the news/events, It's only going to take you to whatever they said there. It will show you at the bottom a link to a PDF. Click that, you'll get the more details that you're looking for. One, we had the budget for 2025. That was coming up. There's an audit for 2024 pending. A lot of people think that there was something that was shady in regards to how the St. Mirren project was completed. It checked off all the boxes. You can go back to previous videos where I showed you the actual vote with the recording of Vanessa and Valerie voting to approve it after even hearing the total amount of that. Ian did say they did not expect anything out of the ordinary. Two, the total assets, we have 1.04 million for the HOA. The total operating budget was 177K. Remember, we have 2,020 homes at 495 a pop, so we have a pretty big budget. However, we do have a very large amount of neighborhoods to care for. Some of our largest expenses, again, always is landscaping, the massive amount we pay out to the master HOA, and then really, I think the next biggest thing that we've got is how much we're paying Goodwin. In the total reserve, we have 870,000. The total income year to date was 825,000. The total expenses is close to 823,000. So he went on to explain that there is no money for social events or spending. He was really adamant that they're trying to keep the lights on. Now, remember earlier when they're dropping $500 for an armed guard?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Seems to me that there's not much urgency there as far as the spending. It's just a matter of what they want to spend it on. 8, we had the renovation of the fitness center that was unplanned. He talked about upgrades for the electrical from 120 instead of the 220. That was the whole Valerie saga. If you keep seeing her posts about the funds that got moved, that was because as she oversaw that project, she messed up and the board and Goodwin had to come back in and redo everything that she messed up on and fix that. So that was the only unplanned expenses, but we already know that. 9, past due balances, they're starting to come in. Historically, this happens. They're expecting $997,000, and right now, year to date, they've had $725,000 in dues collected. Keep in mind on this, boards previously have tried to go more aggressive to get these in earlier. However, in the situations where that's happened, we spend a lot of money on attorney fees, and in a lot of situations, those attorneys are ruthless with the fees and fines that they put on homeowners. And so the previous board, when we were voting on it, when I was on it, we voted to remove that collection process if it doesn't hit a threshold of a total dollar amount and give that back to Goodwin. So that way it's a lot easier for folks to come up with payment plans and stuff without the attorney, because Connie Hire was getting wild with it with those attorney fees. I think sadly some homeowners are still dealing with those issues, and it's very unclear at this point if she's still operating as the attorney. However, she was let go a while ago with the previous board. That doesn't mean that there's no possibility that she was still running things in regards to the old accounts that her law firm was addressing. Then here's the big one, y'all. Get ready. 10, primary objective for the board to reflect on if they want to raise dues. Now, that phrasing is important, if they want to raise dues. Now, this is something that you may not know, but you can always vote to not raise dues. We're all adults. We've all balanced checkings accounts and savings accounts. You can cut spending elsewhere instead of raising dues on homeowners. Based off of what the likes of Vanessa's bravest soldiers are saying, they're attempting to spin it so that the reason they have to raise the dues is because they are going to claim that we're in a deficit due to the Greenwall project, despite the Greenwall project coming out of the reserve fund. Now remember, again, we've got a reserve fund, we've got an operating fund. Those are two separate things. Reserve fund saving, that's where that came from. The operating fund, that's a whole different thing. So it's weird that now they're trying to position it that they have to raise dues, or they're thinking about it. So remember that. Now, if they don't raise them, excellent. But keep an eye on that. When it came to the voting for the budget, everyone voted to approve it except for Vanessa. She abstained. 9, the manager's report and community update. Ian Knight was filling in for manager. I believe there's some temps that have been brought in from Goodwin ever since they moved Juan without notice to the board, or maybe he talked to Vanessa and not the rest of us. But Ian has brought in Raquel Prado, our previous Goodwin manager, and also another person, I believe they go by Eli. I have yet to meet them. And I can imagine he's not excited about doing a property manager's job. especially considering all of the poor leadership and the drama that has occurred here. As we've learned, he's kind of had his hand in a lot of it. You can go back to my previous videos about the special meetings that he tanked and also the misinformation that he claimed that I was posting things to Town Square that the majority of the board hadn't approved. All there in 4K with receipts. Now, he complained about how much he was working. He states there's complaints about the landscape maintenance. He talked about safety concerns. People in the neighborhood were talking about B&Es, breaking and enterings, parked vehicles on the street, complaints about lighting. They saw a significant uptick in HOAs reporting homes not being taken care of. This is sort of those homes that almost might be abandoned, or if someone's living in there, we don't know if something's happened to them as far as their mobility or their ability to maintain things. Or maybe they're just lazy. That happens too. He appealed to the board to prioritize these items. We'll see what that looks like, whether it's them going aggressive and doing force mows and then charging it to the homeowners or fining homeowners into compliance. That'll be another thing to see how the board decides to interact with homeowners that are having issues. Last part, and this is a fun one because y'all may not know this, but Ian has accused me of being the one who called in, well, also Vanessa's bravest soldiers, have accused me of calling in the amenity center and getting Goodwin kicked out of there by the city of Austin for not having a certificate of occupancy. I didn't address that with Ian. I told to the rest of the board, minus Vanessa, of course, that that was not the case. I never called in the amenity center to get the Goodwin folks kicked out of there. However, once I found out that that has occurred, I did go to the code enforcement folks and ask them, well, hold on a second. If Goodwin had a deal where they were allowed to use it and they were working on a maintenance bond, and I'll play the clip up here so you can hear it.
This is the process with the amenity center. There is a holdup with there was a final inspection that was needed a couple of months back. And the holdup was the city required a maintenance bond for a sidewalk that we had some issues getting. The maintenance bond essentially had to be pulled by the contractor who poured that sidewalk. Well, the contractor parted ways with Harris Branch and declined to pull the maintenance bond. So Goodwin stepped in and assume the liability of being the contractor and is essentially at present getting all of the outstanding items for that building so that we can have it open.
Okay.
I assume this will occur in the next 7 to 10 days.
Okay, cool. What's the timeline? Thank you.
But again, this was prompted by, we kind of had to revert back to the drawing board because the facility was reported, here recently, and we had to go back and essentially restart the entire process. Someone called the city and told the city that it's been occupied, and told the city that we're operating out of there. The city came and told us that we got to close the building, and we had to really go back to the drawing board and refile everything, assume the liability overall just to get it done.
You have to have receipts with these folks because they'll turn around and say that that's not what they said. So you can hear the recording of him talking about this. But essentially, when I reached out to code enforcement and asked about did they have a deal, what I'm going to put on the screen so that way you can read it yourself, the code enforcement didn't have anything in writing and did not admit or did not know that Goodwin was operating out of that building, and they did not acknowledge that there was any agreement to do that. The reason why I reached out to them, because if Goodwin, Ian Knight, is saying he has a deal with them about using it, but then when the inspector shows up, his people are removed, well then what was the deal? Was there a deal? And that's why I followed up. Turns out there was no deal. And it really erodes my trust, at least, maybe yours, in Goodwin's ability to provide accurate information. 10 committee reports, a lifestyle and events, name that was created for what is technically a director on the board. This is a name that's not actually any sort of officer position, per the bylaws. We only have president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and a director. It seems as if the board's going to keep this moniker moving forward. So the director position, they're going to refer to it as the lifestyle and events director. Vanessa covered the newsletter. This is something that you might have seen her in. Many were not excited to see a sitting president use an HOA-funded newsletter to the community to complain about what essentially boiled down to how democracy works, one voice, one vote. However, as we've learned, that's not how the presidency works. There's a lot more power in that role than we had originally anticipated.
It's got to be the king.
That newsletter has been pretty messy the last couple times. Lots of outdated design and just plastered with photos. I think there was even one where it was just an AI transcript of a meeting, just vomited all over the pages. Expected. It's been run by Vanessa the entire time, with Jose trying his best to assist. I know that they've just created, Vanessa and her team have created 2 Facebook groups. I think one is a page and the other is a bulletin group. So if you're seeing that posted around, just keep in mind who runs that as far as the expectations of the information that you'll be getting in those groups. Social media, I already covered that. Events, there is the Fall Festival. However, there's no money. They have a committee pending presenting an executive session, which, folks, this is something that's really important. And maybe it was not the correct way that Mike McLaughlin was running it and that Connie was overseeing it. But the executive session was only supposed to be used for sensitive information regarding homeowners and was not supposed to be used for a way to shield yourself from homeowners overhearing your discussions about how the board's operating, what vendors you want to use, your experiences with those vendors, things of that nature. Executive session, from my understanding and the way it was used previously, was only for sensitive information regarding homeowners. But under Vanessa's presidency, that is not the case. Executive session seems to be able to be used for anything you don't want the community to know about, whether there is sensitive information in it or not. The president talked about finding money and getting it sponsored from outside groups, stated will be a donation and volunteer. That fall festival is planned for the 26th of October at the Harris Branch Amenity Center, I believe from 4 to 8:30 p.m. The flyers are already up on Nextdoor. If you got little ones, that would be the place to go. For, I believe it's going to be trigger. The board approved that, all in favor. The other item on the agenda was the December garage sale. They wanted to add another garage sale. That, of course, got approved. B, safety. This is when a homeowner, one Barry Fazdick, I believe is how you pronounce it, he's serving on a committee for safety. He basically got up and espoused his legacy of working for the city. He's been retired for 14 years. He was a park inspector for maintenance and mowing, and an inspector for mowing. So I don't know much about him, but this is a newly formed committee that is going to be taking a look at mowing under the umbrella term safety. The board approved that. All were in on that. Playground and pool report. Barry discussed issues he had with cracks. I'm guessing he was talking about the concrete around the pool. He talked about wanting to fill those in. He went over the base of the slides in the playgrounds. He mentioned that there was some of them that were starting to show signs of issues, wear and tear. However, they could be repaired easily, and he recommended to monitor them. He stated the grounds look good. Safety services at both playgrounds look good. According to Barry, Grace wanted them to cut down the pecan tree branches over the playground over there in Edinburgh Gardens. Now, there's a playground over there with some amazing, I'm sure, 100-year plus pecan trees. Those trees make the playground hospitable during high heat events. Those trees have already been reviewed by an arborist. They were already addressed with their limbs cut by the previous board. That was something that I ran, so they should be just fine. Vanessa chimed in, reminding him that they have no money for an arborist, but as I mentioned, those trees have already been trimmed last year and were reviewed by an arborist, so they should be good to go. Community workshops. 1, landscaping concerns. Moderators were Sunscape, Goodwin, and Co. There was nothing talked about there. Sunscapes was not at this meeting. Ian didn't say anything on this. Property security. Ranger was not there. APD was not there. I don't know if the armed guard was a Travis County constable, but they definitely didn't get up and say anything during this period. 3, the no-mow areas, force mow, greenbelt, pest controls. moderator, Sunscapes and Goodwin. This is Fred's project, I'm sure, but I kind of already addressed this earlier. They encouraged workshops for all of the above and for homeowners to come out and join these workshops. Architectural Change Committee, letter C. Michelle presented this. She was previously on the Architectural Change Committee, but now that she's on the board, they have to backfill her spot. There was a previous homeowner last year who had quit after the big drama that went down at one of the meetings, and that was backfilled by the previous board 4-1 in favor for one of our community members, Alex. I asked questions about whether he had been onboarded. Ian stated that there was no onboarding process, however, was quickly contradicted by the folks who were on the ACC.
The notice for that will be posted on Town Square.
I had a question on that ACC. Did I ever get his onboarding to the ACC that the board approved him to fill in?
What was the name?
Actually, the previous board voted, I think 4-1 to include him on the ACC. Not for Michelle's space, but for, I forget her name, she quit. Ian, was that done? I messaged you about it, I never got a response.
There is no onboarding process.
So they just, how do they know how to use the...
When I was in the ACC, before we started, we had a presentation with the legal counsel back then. This was before we had the current. And it was just like a PowerPoint presentation for a good 2 hours where she was just like saying here are the bylaws for the HOA, sent us a packet for the HOA bylaws as well. So we were wondering if the new Alex, I think his name, is going to get that same thing or not.
It depends on the process of the board.
Yeah, we're looking at the ACC process right
I
now.
haven't put anybody through a process.
Okay, but he's on the ACC at this point.
I don't think I've seen him on the website yet for the architectural committee.
We'll check into it. Okay.
Or went through that. So it seems as if they're trying to delay the addition of Alex to the ACC despite the 4 majority voting him on to replace that previous homeowner who quit. 11, new business. A, Harris Branch Clubhouse. Talked about that. B, the homeowner collection process and procedure review. Here we go again with short non-answers. They stated they will talk about it, whatever that means. 12, old business. A, the Merrill Lynch investment, update to prior motion in the finalizing of next steps. B, the Equitrust investment, reinvest in existing investment to generate interest income for the association. Now, this is one of the vehicles that Ian brought forth to the previous board that was voted into approval by myself, Tony, and Vanessa. Ian presented this to the board as a way to recover the reserve funds that were spent on the large investment along St. Marin. Now, something that caught my ear is we don't have any money and it's going to take 3 years to get all that money back. At this point, I asked him. I just have one question on the Equitrust investment. This is for Ian. In regards to, you mentioned we spent 3 years of savings. My understanding was the previous board invested in this to rapidly accrue those savings. How much faster will this vehicle deliver than the 3.5 years of savings?
I don't know.
Do you feel that it will make it a shorter amount of time?
I have no idea.
If you were to guess.
I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. With the reinvestment into this Equitrust fund, in the accrual of interest on it, how much shorter are we expecting the recovery of the 3 years worth of savings that was spent on the large investment on St. Marin? Luckily, I recorded his response, but my understanding is that those people online were not able to hear that question or his response. Isn't that fascinating? We were told that this was to be a vehicle for the board to recover funds for the reserve fund at a faster rate than just putting away savings for the 3 years. Now, for some reason, Ian was unable to clarify how much shorter that would be. Now, I'm not by any means a dollars and decimals guy, but If you had the board invest in this to recover funds for the reserve fund, wouldn't that pay out faster than if we just put away savings each year? Isn't that the whole point of taking our reserve fund and putting it in this vehicle? But didn't seem like he really wanted to answer that question honestly. And my suspicion is if he did, then you might realize that the 3 years of savings that was spent on this investment in the tangible world to address an issue that many homeowners had issues with would actually be covered much sooner than 3 years. But that's not a great talking point. That doesn't hit hard as much as, oh, we lost 3 years of savings. So that's something to always keep in mind when you're listening to an Ian or anyone like that. The framework that they communicate things to you in is always intentional, and it will give you insight into where their position is and what it is that they're angling to put out there. See the Sunscape landscape contract, didn't talk about that. I wouldn't be surprised if Vanessa and her regime decide to kick Sunscape to the curb because she really doesn't like them. However, if they do that, it will be another indictment that they don't really care about the operating cash for this community, because all of the other bids that we got, I guess they could find someone cheaper. But out of the 5 folks who put out the bids for her and Valerie, Sunscapes came in way below everyone else. In fact, when SunGrow found out that we had switched to Sunscapes, they had asked, we would be interested in taking that on. And I said, can you beat 157,000? And they said, no. So that's something to keep in mind. If you all of a sudden see a new landscaping company out there, definitely ask how much we're paying for them per year. D, the Harris Branch subdivision survey. This is something that you've heard me talk about. I'm glad that they're doing it. This was an idea of mine way back in the day when it came out to the first survey. And I'm glad to see that they are implementing that, and it's going to be a little bit more pinpointed to each subdivision or neighborhood rather in the community. So be sure to respond to that, because they are going to point to that and say, well, this is what you said you wanted. Whether it's 5 people in your neighborhood that say something or 50. So do participate. I'll post it here once it drops. At the end of the meeting, they went into the voting session for officers. Now, remember, we talked about this. We only vote people to the board. The board votes for the officers. So none of us have ever voted for Vanessa to be president. All we've done is voted for her to be on the board, and the members on the board in a majority vote voted for her to be president. They went through this as expected. I actually typed out my expectation of who was going to be who, and definitely could say that I had pre-watched the meeting. The officers for one term is going to be Vanessa as president, Fred as VP, and Michelle as treasurer. The secretary, that's the position that they decided to hold off on handing out, and they are going to do a notice of candidacy. You should have already gotten that. If you're interested in running, be sure to apply. Don't tell them you know me or you'll watch my videos. Be sure to say you hate me, and they'll get you right on that board.
Never seen him before, sir.
In the last one, we talked about the lifestyle, which is just director. They gave to Vinny. However, it didn't seem like they asked Vinny if she wanted to be the lifestyle, but they went ahead and moved forward on that, and we'll see if she wants to keep that moniker or just remain as a director. Usually director is a great spot to be, especially if it's your first time or you don't have the time to do parties and events or go through things like that. Director is the spot to pick to kind of get a lay of the land. 13, adjournment. It ended at 7:47. So for those of you who have attended the other meetings that Vanessa's presided over with Ian there, you should take note of that, because all of a sudden we have our parameters, we kept things in line, we cut homeowners off. The capability was there, just the intention to do so wasn't in the previous meetings. But now that Vanessa has what she wants, thanks to the help of Ian, you can see the difference in how they manage these meetings.
Turns out, you could.
Now let's talk about the election. For those of you who supported me and voted, I always recommend voting online. Do not hand your ballot to anybody. And also, if there's a homeowner at any of these events that's handing you a ballot and standing over you while you're voting, don't do it. Don't let them do that. They have no right to see how you vote. I know that was happening at the pool nights for the Fred and Michelle campaigns. So be sure your best bet is always to vote online, because that goes through Election Buddy, a third party tabulator, not through the folks at Goodwin and not through the folks that Goodwin will pick from homeowner volunteers. And we'll talk about that in a second here. So you can see we took a spanking if you count the absentee ballots. Now, when Jason and I reached out to Goodwin about a recount, they shared with us the actual totals from Election Buddy. These used to be available to all homeowners as soon as the election was done. You could see the results yourself. However, under the last couple elections, that's not been an option, which is very sussy to me. Why would you not let us see on our own what that is instead of having to reach out to you to get those numbers? If you take out the absentee ballots and look at the Election Buddy, it's a relatively tight race in the sense of the numbers make sense as far as the spread. Fred and Michelle pulled over 100, Jason pulled 79, myself 97. The concerning part to me is the massive disparity between the absentee ballots. And that's not necessarily that I'm upset that I've lost. I've lost before, okay? We can run again and keep running till the end of time. Or Vanessa moves out into her second home in Colorado and abandons this community for cooler weather. 162 to 4 and 2 raises some eyebrows. And then when you look over here at the tabulation conducted by, you have Mike McLaughlin, the previous president, who, remember how he didn't appreciate Vanessa or Valerie and said they were so unprofessional and he didn't want to run again and they were terrible, flipped the script this election and just glazed up Vanessa and her candidates, Fred and Michelle. He was one of the people who was counting those absentee ballots. Then you have Grace Williams. That's another, remember I said, bravest soldiers of Vanessa's. This person, you've heard her voice on my previous videos, but I didn't identify her. But now that she's out and about and openly using her full name, I'm going to go ahead and put that up on the screen here so you can see. But if you go back to the previous videos where they're talking about Mr. Maine, that's one of the Graces. And remember in that video where we talked about, where they mentioned that they weren't able to see my post all of a sudden, and that's when I realized they were using somebody else's Nextdoor account to see mine. I showed the screenshots of me blocking the two folks, or maybe just the one person who I think was showing them my post on Nextdoor, and then all of a sudden they weren't able to see them. So there's another sussy pick as far as the tabulation goes. Donald Powell, not familiar with them, but two of the tabulators came from the Vanessa camp.
No one's going to run an article about a lost election.
Now, this election definitely saw a lot of firsts for those of you who've been following along or those of you who are new to it, thanks to the whirlwind of information and exchanges that were going on during it. I plan to be going to all of the subsequent meetings and giving you updates on that. So be sure, again, hit subscribe, leave questions, concerns, or praises in the comments below. I want to make sure that I'm catering this broadcast so that way it is more enjoyable for you to watch and you can say anything down there as far as your opinions on things that you want me to do or not do. For those of you who supported me, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And with all that being said, I would say we have a break after this whirlwind of a election. However, we've got another whirlwind of an election coming up on November 5th. So with that in mind, y'all stay safe out there. Take care. Bye.